Thank you.
No problem.
So with the formalities out of the way, I'd just like to introduce you to our guest speaker, whose name is Melissa Taylor Gates. She, as I mentioned, she's the Innovation and Evaluation Manager for Minds at PIR Mental Health. She's also our technical support team lead for several of our Parkwood Institute research virtual events, including the upcoming Research Day. Melissa believes foremost in empathy and compassion for those in the world around us. Her work centralizes around power, inequality, and authentic communication. She strives to foster safe spaces where people can learn from and care for each other in a holistic way. And outside her work, she's a storyteller, archer, tea lover, feminist, writer, and gamer. So I'd like to ask you to join me in welcoming our guest speaker, Melissa, and you can clap normally, or if you prefer, you can express yourself through the Zoom features. Thank you, Melissa. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much today for coming out. I wish we could meet in person and have nice outdoor, outside of class, sitting in the enjoying the weather, but hopefully you'll be able to get some nice time outside once you're done work for the day. So yeah, this is the virtual poster presentation. And we offer this kind of every year as an option for people who are looking to make their presentations more engaging, but also for people who are struggling with some of maybe the base technicalities. So things like, actually I can go here to show you. So these are the kind of three different highlighted areas we talk about. So the first one is there's a section on improving your slides, how to make them more engaging, more action oriented. The next one is stepping up your setup. So ways that you can make your video, audio, all those things a higher quality. And then the last one is the actual process of recording and submitting, which I know for many of us is the thing we're most unfamiliar with. So some options there and some resources to help. So before we kind of dive in, I always like to get a sense of who's in the room and what actually we want to focus on. We've had some of these workshops where everything is very technical, and we've had some where it's a lot more kind of playing and more imaginative, trying out some new things. So I'd love to get some thoughts. Either feel free to unmute yourself or throw them in the chat. But first and foremost, what are you hoping to learn from the session? And then kind of two other questions is, have you ever presented at a PIR event in the past? And then is there anything memorable outside of this event even that you've seen a presenter do before that maybe you'd like to learn about or share with the group? So I'll give you guys some time to type that up. I know it's a fair amount of questions. And like I said, if anyone wants to unmute, feel free to as well. Oh, and thank you. Yes, PIR is Parkwood Institute Research.
So Natalie wrote in the text, how to add more visuals and not so much text. And that's a great point, because white space is so important to digesting information.
Mm-hmm.
We get an agreement from Myrna to Natalie's comment.
And I will make this whole presentation available afterwards as well. It's fairly long. It's 36 slides, but quite a lot of it is references, resources you can use, lists of tools. So you'll be able to refer back to that as well. So just so you're kind of aware. Okay, engagement.
So we've got some comments, one from Megan, tips for being engaging. Anika adds, what if you don't have results to present? What kind of visuals can you include on the poster? That's an excellent question as well. Anne asks how to add virtual backgrounds to all slides and other technical info.
Mm-hmm.
These are great.
Yeah, really helpful. There's a lot we can discuss, so it's always really useful to see kind of what things people are struggling with in the moment.
And Emma's added, this is her first abstract poster presentation coming up, so she's interested in seeing what it's all about and any tips and advice. And Emma, this is a great place. There's a number of people who are new, just like yourself, as well as people who are experienced. And Melissa has probably walked most of us through our first virtual poster presentation. So she's a great resource.
All right, well, that gives us somewhere to start. Feel free to keep throwing in questions you have throughout. I'll be keeping the chat open on the side here, but I won't be able to see your faces. So if anybody has like a hand raised, I'll have Taryn look to that. Again, like I said, I'll be sharing this resource after. So the next thing I have here is a few useful online tools, and we can add to this as we go. So if people have any recommendations of things that they use, you'll have this available to be able to help you. So we can just go briefly through kind of what the point of each one is. So these first four here, so PowerPoint, Google Slides, Canva, and Prezi are all options for designing your poster presentation. So a lot of us are familiar with PowerPoint. That's kind of where you get your start in most cases. Google Slides is very comparable. It's just allows you to do so online. So the presentation I'm showing you today is a Google Slides presentation. In most cases, they're going to be very similar to PowerPoint. It's just whether or not you want it to be shareable in the same way. Canva is kind of a newer one on the kind of slide presentation. You've probably seen posters. We use it for all the posters we do for events, but they have some really, really great options for presentations. And a lot of built-in templates that are really great. Again, really good for sharing. And so that's another option. And the last one I have here is called Prezi. Prezi is a little bit different. It kind of focuses on this idea of zooming in on content. So if you almost imagine, I find this is a really nice one to consider if you're working on kind of the traditional poster. So you have a traditional poster, it takes up the full screen, and what Prezi does is let you zoom into specific content. So you could zoom in, look at, specifically your abstract, look at specifically your references. So it can be a really nice, quick way to allow you to do that. Obviously, you can do other fun things. People sometimes write the name of their project, and then they'll actually put all the content within the name. So there's some fun stuff to do there, but it does take a little bit more technical stuff to do the really fun things. This one is kind of a new one. So Beautiful.ai is a resource that basically uses AI to try to create a presentation for you. So you put in the content you have, and it will try to create a presentation that will work for you. If you're interested in AI stuff, it can be kind of fun to play with. So I just kind of have that in there to have a little bit of interest. These next two, Slides Carnival and Slides Go, are both template programs. So one of the questions was about kind of what do we do for virtual backgrounds, or master slides is what they're called on these tools. And I love using these two. Slides Carnival is one of my go-tos. They have templates for the first three programs there. So PowerPoint, Google Slides, and Canva. And all you do is go and say, I'm looking for something that's formal. I'm looking for something that's the color blue. And they'll have a whole bunch of things available. So we can take a look at any of these as we continue if they're more interested in looking. But I love using a template. It saves a ton of time and gives you like a nice clean basis to work off of. And then the last three over here on the side we have are all image programs. So I tried to pick ones that have free options. I use Pexels quite a bit myself, but they're really, really great for pulling out images that you can use just to kind of like was mentioned, kind of how do you fill out visuals on a poster in a presentation and make it a little bit more engaging. And you can use that kind of stock image to do so. Always better to use real images if you have them. People can usually tell if something's a stock image, but it's certainly better than having nothing. So again, you'll have the presentation, you'll be able to look at any of those that interest you. But we'll keep on the list. So if anybody has any other programs they use in any kind of those areas, feel free to throw it in the chat and we'll add it to the list, and then we can all kind of bring our sources together. So part one we have here is about improving your slides. I try to throw in some jokes now and again to try to keep people more engaged, trying to having fun. There's actually somebody online who was talking about how millennials use too many kind of funny jokes and then the point of their presentation when they write journal articles. So maybe I'm leaning too heavily into that, but So the first thing I would say is you're working on your first presentation, you're kind of not sure where to start. So the first thing I would say is start with building what you know. So most of you have probably done a poster like this before. This is one I've pulled from Minds, which is the group that I work with. And it's a pretty standard poster. Not the most engaging as far as content goes, but the kind you'd see at a normal in-person event. And we have quite a bit of information just pulling from that. So in most cases, the kind of main heart of your presentation is going to be these 4 center parts. The overview is obviously very important. It's kind of like a takeaway at the beginning so people know what they're getting into, make sure that they're in the right presentation. And then at the end, it's a great way to sum up everything you've talked about. The methodology is, of course, very important, especially if you're doing something with a lot of technical results. Reviewing those results, and then, of course, any conclusions that you've drawn from that work. The other sections are important to have, but again, usually take up a much smaller portion of the actual presentation. So this isn't the most engaging poster, of course, as it is right now, even if I was to enlarge it. So let's play with that now for a second. So even if I make it as large as possible, it's going to be very, very difficult for people to read. So we've got a few kind of options to deal with that. And this is, again, those kind of 2 things I was showing you. So the first one is to zoom in on sections of the poster. So in comparison, if I enlarge this to, again, this is very easy and straightforward. Obviously the text is too small there, but you can see much easier to read that content. So even if I'm just pulling from a high quality document, it's going to be a lot easier to follow through if we zoom in on specific parts rather than the whole resource overall. The second option, of course, the more preferable option, is to create slides based on your content. So this is a slide that was made by one of our youth team members to support the project they're working on. And there we go. So this gives a lot of a better way of kind of sharing the information. It allows you to control the fonts, and it also means that you are better able to edit the content. So this is a picture, but if I'd made it in this presentation, I'd be able to change this content. Really simple things, like sometimes I always find right at the end, I'll have found a misspelling or I'm missing a period at the end of a sentence. So it's really great to have. This template, for example, has these images and it has a whole bunch of different options, but this image is kind of grayed out. So it's trying to kind of give you something to look at, but it's not meant to be the highlight of the presentation. So those are kind of your 2 options. So based on what you know and based on how much time you have to prepare, it's important to consider how much you can do, what's reasonable for you to do in that time. Worst case scenario is you spend all your time working the presentation, you're working on the technicalities, and then you're struggling with being able to record on time and actually attend the event. So we never want it to be something where it's become too constraining. So yeah, just take into account exactly how much time you have. So again, the lowest prep option here, I would say, is this. You have the kind of your standard poster, open a high quality version of it, and then you can even zoom, like you don't even have to use, I mentioned Prezi is a tool that lets you zoom, but you can share screen and you can actually just zoom in as you talk. So again, this is the quickest, easiest option. Like this is, it's the day before and you forgot to record. This is a quick way to get your information across. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about visuals and engagement in the chat, and you're not really going to get those in this. So the more time and consideration you put into the way you're presenting, the better, obviously, the end resource will be. That said, this gets across what you need to get across. So if it's a question of whether or not you get to share your research, this is still a better option. So when you're making your own option 2, a custom presentation. This is kind of the process I take. So I, like I said, use Slides Carnival a lot. Actually, let's click on it and go on a little journey together. Are people able to see that I'm on the website now, or are you still seeing the presentation? Perfect. Awesome. So it's a pretty straightforward website and everything is free on this. The creator is really, really great as far as that goes. So we've got the thing at the top here, which lets you pick the style you're looking for, or the color you're looking for, or just view all templates. But if we even scroll down here, you'll see that there's all kinds of different options. There's fun kind of kid style ones. And then below they all have these icons that show you what resource it's for. So this is specifically available in Canva only, whereas this one, for example, on magnetism is available in Canva, Google Slides, and PowerPoint. So you can search by whatever you're comfortable using. That's kind of the most important part, is what are you comfortable using as a resource? And you can go from there. I usually pick something more formal just because we're kind of doing more well, we're doing a formal presentation. So let's pick one that has a few options here. Let's do this one. So let's say I like this template. I think it's kind of interesting. So if I click on it, it will pull up more information about it. And you can actually click through all of the different slide backgrounds. So what's really nice about this is it does walk you through the download options, but it also gives you all of these options for sharing things. So for example, right here, it's got a little chart. You could fill it in with your own data, which is really, really handy, much nicer than having to make your own chart. Things like this are really handy if you're doing things across a wider area. So you could even take a close-up of Canada and put on locations you're using. And again, just different ways of pulling stats out. So I really love using tools like this because it really allows for everything to be kind of engaging and fun. As you saw there, this one has a little animation, which is fantastic. You can obviously update it and change it to your information. But it kind of saves you the time of having to worry about all those details yourself. You can change the coloring and things like that, but I would say as you're starting out, pick a template that seems like it's going to kind of work for you and go from there. Again, one thing about Slides Carnival I really like is that they always have the same thing. So every poster or every template you download will have all of these things. So they'll always have a SWOT analysis. They'll always have an option for timeline. They'll always have a checklist. So they've given you a lot of different options and you don't have to use them all. Usually I only end up using a few templates, maybe, 5 to 6 different versions in one PowerPoint, but this one has 25. They also create custom icons that you can use. So when you download the presentation, you can use these throughout and you can just copy them from the resource list. So again, you can choose whichever you like and then download it for whatever resource you want. And then from there, it's just a matter of filling in your content. So I really love using resources like this, just handy things that kind of take away a little bit of that work from you. And sometimes that does also give you some inspiration to say, how am I going to share this data? Maybe you didn't think about sharing it in a pie chart, but suddenly you have the content, you have the template to do it, and you realize, oh, okay, I could do that. Here's a couple examples, and they're both in this this template as well. But you can see there's the data sharing on one side, and then on the other side, that's kind of showing the highlights of some information that are shared. And actually, we had 2 stats here. So, we've added in the 100% success, just as kind of a little fun thing. But you've got lots of options there. Again, this is really focusing on just the content and just the numbers. Doesn't really have a lot of videos or images, but of course you could throw an image there on the corner on the right side of this numbered column, and that would look great. So guidelines around your text. So like I said, when you've picked a template, one thing I would say is, unless you're kind of really confident with templates, you've gotten some experience, don't fiddle too much. Don't, move around your headings. For example, like I could, raise this heading larger, but then it's not lined up anymore. And then when I flip between slides, it's drawing a little bit more attention just from the fact that it's not lined up. So you're trying to draw attention to where the content is that you want the person to pay attention to and not distract them too much. And that's why, you kind of have to use a light hand as far as how engaging those images are. If the image is really important to the content you're sharing, let's say you're sharing a presentation on homelessness and you have an image of one of the housing options you've had available, that image should be front and center. That's really important. In this bottom right one, you have somebody kind of being prepared. That kind of supports the overall message, but it doesn't really specifically tied to the work. So in that case, the image is kind of more background. In this case, it's a little faded out. So keep your images, or keep your text, sorry, simple and consistent. And as brought up already, we want to use visuals and bullet points as much as possible. So on this left side one, this is an example of a presentation that's been shared. So obviously it's got a ton of information. It's basically a wall of text. We've got some misspellings, or at least the computer thinks they're misspellings. And the image here, the icon that's being included, isn't really centered, isn't really part of the presentation in a meaningful way. So in comparison, we've got the presentation on the right. So instead of maybe having 4 points on one slide, we have 4 slides, each with 1 point on them. There is sometimes a thought where some people say, well, I don't want a long presentation, you know, I don't want so many slides. And there is something to that. Obviously, we don't want it to be so long that it's not engaging. But also breaking up your content does not necessarily make your presentation longer. So going from the first slide here and changing it to only having 1 point on 4 different slides isn't actually going to slow you down all that much. It might make the presentation seem longer from a number count, but it'll make it a lot easier for people to understand the message you're trying to give. And especially these events, we have some people with lived experience. We have people from the community who attend as well. So they might not have the same knowledge or background. So even something as simple as saying this is a PIR event, not everybody necessarily knows what that means. So just trying to be aware of breaking that down and giving people time to understand. Image guidelines, this is a really simple one. Most of you probably already know this, is the importance of preserving image dimensions. So here's an example of images being changed, but there's also other things that can help you. So one thing I do whenever I'm resizing an image, and I'll go to this one, for example, is if I resize this image, thankfully, this one is going to keep the size for me. So no matter how large I go, it's going to keep that sizing. Not every resource does that. If it doesn't, if you hold down the Shift key when you're resizing your image, it will allow you to keep the sizing consistent. So just to make sure you're not getting things scrunched or changed. The other really nice thing, and again, I'm going to use this slide, even though it's not the one we're on, is you can use guidelines. So if I'm trying to, for example, make these 2 images line up, as I'm resizing, you'll see that when they get to the same size, it actually shows me this little grid line. So it's a little kind of bar in the center between the 2. It's light blue, so you may not be able to see it too well. And you can also see there's some along the bottom that show me that these are the same size. So you can use these kind of image guidelines and these tools to help you make sure everything is lined up. I'm using, like I said, Google Slides. So if I right click, sorry, not on that, I gotta pick on something that isn't text. If I right click, there's an option at the bottom that says show guides. So I can even set myself up to show these guides at all times, which can help as I'm making things centered. Oops, hang on here. Where's the second one? Guide, and I want vertical. So you can see, you can set these up however you want. You can set them up so as I bring it to the middle, it turns bright red. But you can use these guidelines to set however you want. So maybe you always want your text to start at a certain height. You can drag this into place, and now anytime I'm moving text, I can make sure that it's lining up properly. So there's lots of little tools like that in various resources, and you're going to mostly find them by kind of clicking around or just kind of knowing what you're looking for. But I find guidelines really, really helpful. I find it really helpful for centering things and really helpful for making sure that everything lines up the way I want it to. I didn't talk too much about, we'll kind of, yeah, we'll go through this one briefly. So as far as pacing goes, most of you will know this, the most important thing as far as the presentation goes, especially if you have a time limit, is to practice ahead of time, to have a sense of what your intro is going to be, what you're going to say. I always find that if you don't have a ton of time to practice everything, at least plan what you're going to say on the first couple slides. Often, if you get anxious at the very beginning of a presentation, it's hard to kind of get back into your flow. But if you have a plan for those first few slides, you kind of get into your flow and then you get into your content, and it's a little bit easier. We have an option here, plan for breaks and engagement. There's engagement's our next slide, so we'll talk about that there. But depending on how long you're presenting for, it's always useful to have breaks for people. I try to have a break every hour. So this presentation is only an hour, so we don't really have one, but we do have the dedicated time at the end for Q&A. Yeah. So options for engagement. So we do most of our presentations through Zoom. We are using a new platform that will be presented to the audience to use. But anyone who's presenting live will be using Zoom. And it's kind of our go-to. So there's a lot of options as far as that goes. A great way to start is always ask a question as you begin. Like I did at the beginning of this, asking if there's anything specific we wanted to talk about. And I have a little list here of some things that I really want to focus on. There isn't too much of a focus right now on the recording process, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that. I'm just going to, go over it briefly and then rely on the fact that you have the slides and can ask questions. But asking a question before you begin gives everyone a chance to be part of it, to get a sense of what you want to present. And just, let you kind of fit the presentation to the audience. I've had some before where I show up and it turns out the audience is entirely different. You expect it to be all people with lived experience and they're all professionals, and then you suddenly have to pivot because obviously those people don't have the same goals. So other options, use surveys and polls. Mentimeter is a great option because it's free. You can use that anywhere, you just include the link and then people can answer their questions there. If you're using Zoom, there's lots of other options in Zoom. You can use polls. I think we have them all kind of set up in this one, actually, if I'm honest. But you have a whole bunch of different options as far as that goes of what you want to share. So yeah, here we go. So in this option, we have polls, we have breakout rooms, which are great if you're doing kind of more engaging presentation where you want to have people have a conversation. And of course, lots of things like that. It really depends what you want to get out of it. And again, I think focusing on kind of what is your goal with the engagement is always a good place to start. So for example, as we're planning for this event, one thing we always try to do is get people to register early. And it's always difficult to get people to register early because, of course, we all have busy schedules and we don't want to agree to things that we don't necessarily have time for. So, we, for this event have done if you register ahead of time, you are entered to win kind of a door prize. So again, that's a means of engagement to try to focus on something we want. We want people to register early, so we're offering a prize. If you want to gather more information about your audience, let's say through a poll and say, are you a person with lived experience? Are you a person who works in the field? Are you a researcher? A poll might be a great way to pull up an average, especially if you have a lot of people in the presentation. So really focus on what the goal of your engagement is. On the right side here, we have this one, which is through Mentimeter actually as well. But basically in this option, we've said the question is enter 3 words that come to mind when you think of online learning. And this is a collection of all the words that the people added. So the larger words are the ones that came up more often. So future technology awesome are really common words that came up probably 3 at least times. And then you see some smaller words, self-paced, anytime, anywhere. And those ones are a bit smaller. So again, if you're trying to get people to kind of share a series of words or concepts about what they've taken away from your research, for example, something like this can be a really engaging way of doing it because it allows everybody to not only see what they have to share, but also see how that fits into what everyone else has gathered from the information. So generally speaking, if you're going to ask questions, usually yes or no questions are good, as well as just kind of keeping it to 1 to 5 questions. Generally speaking, unless it's a workshop, you kind of don't do too many questions as far as that goes, just to make sure that we're actually getting to the content. Okay, a few other presentation. These are just some helpful resources to have available. So this is a great presentation on more effective slides. It kind of compares a very simple slide with a more complex version. Again, not the, the most radical presentation by any means. If I make this a little bit bigger, for example. There we go. So you see that the presentation, I'm just going to push this one to the back here. There we go. So if you see this one, the original presentation, this is too much text. It's just a whole bunch of text on the screen. Whereas on the other side, we've got a nice big image, and then we've got some keywords instead. That's another nice thing about using bullet points is you don't have to write a whole sentence. You can just focus on the core information you want to get across. So I like this one because it gives you kind of what does my slide look like, and then what can I do? And again, it's just kind of giving you the basics there. The other is this is 19 video presentation tips, and it's just a nice little kind of list of things you can do that I find really helpful. The last thing I have in this presentation is some useful commands that I use. So some of these you guys probably already know about. So the first is Control-C, Control-V. So Control-C, if I highlight text and I hold the Control button and then click C, it will copy that text. And now if I go to the next line and I push Control-V, it'll copy that text exactly. So that can be really useful, especially if you're copying from another document. So if you have a Word file, for example, it's really nice to use that. It saves you time, but it also saves any errors you might make when you're copying, just because, we all make mistakes as we're typing. Another one I really like is paste without formatting. So for example, if I copied this, I'm going to use the Control-C again, the title here, and bring it down. If I paste it, it's going to show up in this header font, which in some cases is great. I might want that. But let's say I want that to be, instead, I want it to be in the same format as the rest of these bullet points. So if I right click and paste without formatting instead of just pasting, the control is Control-Shift-V. But if I click that instead, it puts it in the same font. In this case, obviously it's uppercase, but it's going to be the same font size. So again, just a nice helpful way of making sure that you're adding content without having to play with the formatting. It allows you to really keep whatever the formatting is that the original template had. We talked a little bit about grid lines and centering. I'm a big advocate for it. So for this one, for example, something I might do is resize this box so that it kind of just fits the content that I've written. And then I'm going to grab on the side of it and drag it down until I see that red line. That red line is going to tell me that I'm in the center of this image. And then if I click and drag over the image and the text, and then I click on them, I can drag them again and I can say, okay, I want both of these together to be centered. So now both of these things are treated as one object. And that object is now centered in the center of the page. So that's grouping and shift select. So that's the thing there. So if you don't want to drag, you can click on something and hold down the shift button and then click on another thing. And that will do the same thing to kind of gather those together. You can just drag them as is and they'll move as a group. Another option you can do is make that semi-permanent, is if you right click when they're both selected. And then you want to, it doesn't have the option here. Some resources have the option to group them. And then you can have them be basically treated always as one grouped resource. Lots of options here that'll be really helpful. Again, you can center on the page by this instead of by dragging. And you saw before I was dragging things forward and back. So let's say I want to put these text here. Obviously this image is not the right coloring, but if I wanted to have this text be on top of that, if I right click on it and I order it to the front, bring it to the front, now that text is on top of the image. So again, lots of little things you can do to kind of make things present the way you want them to. I'll come back to our normal. Next thing is transitions and animations. So again, we're using Google Slides right now. So at the top here, we have an option called transitions. So if you click on it, it will actually break it down and tell you exactly what you need. So a slide transition is between two slides. So it'll actually change how one slide goes to the next slide. I don't have any in here, but let's say I want to do a slide or a dissolve. You can click whichever you like, flips. And then you can choose how long it takes for that to happen. So slower time, obviously, for 4.5 seconds to change between slides is probably a bit long, but then again, sometimes 0.3 is, too fast. So find somewhere that you're happy with, and then you can apply that to all the slides. It'll give it a nice consistent look, or you can go in each slide and change it independently. Then you can also play it to see how everything looks. So that's how the dissolve will look. And if I'm not happy with that, I want it to be a little faster, I have to stop it first, but then I can drag this and say, no, I want it to go faster. Let's try that out. And you can keep going until you're kind of happy. Again, you can do this slide by slide, or you can apply to all of them. Object animations are things like images. So if I wanted that image to come in, let's say I wanted to appear when or actually, let's do this text. So let's say I'm going to, we'll leave it there. So I want this image to appear when I click. So if I click play, it shows up with just the copy there. And as soon as I click, the image suddenly appears. Again, I can stop that and change it however I want. I can have it fly in, zoom in. So let's say we want it to fly in from the left. And you can do on click, or you can do, anything else you want to do. Sometimes you do timings. It really depends. So let's say we want to fly in on a click. So again, it's changing the slide because we have that dissolve animation. It's showing us the other information, and then we click, and there it flies in. So you can do object animations on anything. You can do them on titles. You can do them on text. You can also do it specifically on different parts of this. So if you want each of these to show up one at a time, you can use the object animation to do that. This is going to be a little bit different depending on what you're using. Like I said, this is Google Slides, but you're going to find the word transition or animations is what you're going to be looking for. And it's going to be in the header in some way. There's also sometimes options if you click on the actual text you want to work with. Next up is master slides. We'll just go again over this briefly. So master slides are basically what you use as the basis of anything you're creating. So let's see. There we go. So here we go. We have in this one, it's under slide. And if we go down to change theme, we have options here to change, but we want to edit theme. There we go. So in this one, this is what the master slides are. And basically it'll tell you how every template page is treated. So let's say probably the thing I do most often with this is add a logo. So this one at the top, the theme image, is for every single page. Every single page will have this if you add it in. So if I add a logo in here and then I save and tell it to apply to everything, let's see if I can. I'm just going to grab this and we're going to pretend that's an image. So if I click that in and I say, I want it kind of down in this corner, I want that true on every slide, then you can basically save it there. And then when you go back to your presentation, you can update and you'll see like right there. Now it is on the background of all these slides. And because it's in the master, it's not something that I'm able to highlight. So I can't change it. It's just kind of always there. And it just allows that consistency across every slide. So that can be really, really helpful. Again, you want to make sure that you're not adding something you want to change. You can't really do it with titles, for example, because your titles are going to change every time. The thing that this does, though, is you can see, delete my fancy background. One thing that is consistent is it says click here to edit style. So this is a stylistic thing, and this is what means that every page of your template is going to have the same title information. So yeah, this is just kind of a nice, helpful way of going through and making sure that everything is consistent. You can change any style and you can look kind of here. So this one, for example, is called the blank complete grid. So if I want to make a change only to slides that have this blank grid on it, I can just change this version and it will change every option that uses that template throughout. So can be really, really helpful, especially if you're trying to, like I said, the most crucial thing I use it for is adding a logo. But I find it really helpful to do that, because then you don't have to worry about adding it to every slide, about making sure it's in the same location, and you're never going to grab it accidentally and move it somewhere where you don't intend to have it. And maybe a little more. Okay, and then the last one I'm going to bring up, and then we'll maybe do some questions, is inserting videos. So you've probably seen this before where somebody's doing a presentation and they have a YouTube link, let's say, to a video or something like that. They click on it, takes a little while to load, it slows things down. So one thing you can do is, if you go to this top menu, you can choose insert, and you can insert whatever you like here. So in that case, if you click on video, for example, you can actually choose the video you want, and it will actually embed the video within your presentation. So instead of having to click and go off and make sure it's sharing and make sure everything's on, it's all included within the presentation body. So it can be a really nice way to include images and videos without having to worry about whether or not they're actually, they're actually going to play for you when the time comes. Also really important if you're presenting without Wi-Fi. I know it doesn't happen a lot now, like usually we have pretty good access to the internet. But that way, if you have it downloaded and you're bringing it somewhere with you, you never have to worry about whether or not you have an internet connection to watch that video. So, okay, looking back at our list of things we talked about. So more visuals. So as you've seen kind of throughout, I've got lots of kind of different visual options. I try to move things around, but at the same time, not kind of make them too busy. So in this case, we've got one image to the right. In this case, we've got two images below, and it really just depends on what I'm trying to get across in that specific presentation. In a lot of these, for example, with useful commands, I've used a keyboard because there are keyboard commands that I'm going to refer to. Maybe that might remind someone like, oh, what was that thing she mentioned about copying and pasting? Where was that? Maybe that image will help remind people. But beyond that, it's not really kind of as important as some of the other images that have been shared. Like, for example, in this engagement where they're showing kind of what are the takeaway terms. Again, talked a little bit about engagement. We can answer more questions about that. But generally, anytime you give people a chance to ask questions or to engage in some meaningful way that changes the presentation is fantastic. As far as if you have a presentation you don't have visuals, again, I would link you to one of these kind of free stock image programs. There are lots of them, but yeah, just make sure you're using images that are free for use. I know a lot of us kind of sometimes go to Google and we'll be like, oh, this one looks good, I'll use this. But there can be issues with copyright as far as that goes. So it's always good to go to a resource that has free stock images, because you know that there's going to be kind of no issue with that. Yeah, and then I think we've talked about virtual backgrounds as well. I guess as far as Zoom goes, for your virtual backgrounds, I don't know if you'll have the options here just because of how we're presenting. But if you go down to where your mute and your video option is, you'll see a little arrow down on the video option. And if you click on that, it'll give you a whole bunch of different options. You can blur your background, you can choose a virtual background, however you want to do that, and just kind of click the option and play with it. We did have a presenter a few events back who I thought did a really cool idea. She made a background for her presentation that was her office, and then put this like literally the view from her camera, and then she put the slide notes on it, like made her presentation with the background being her background, and then she used it as a virtual background she clicked through, so it actually looked like everything was appearing kind of beside her as she was talking. It was a really, really clever kind of idea. And again, all she did was take a picture, like, if my camera is set up exactly like this, take a picture without me in it. And then when the actual presentation happened, she's standing and it looks like she's standing in her office. But really what we're looking at is a slide deck. So lots of kind of really clever, creative things that you can try, but it's really all about kind of playing and having fun and seeing what works for you and for the content you want to share. Open up to questions. We do have more information. So stepping up your setup is the section that talks about your sound, video quality, how you line things up. And then the last section is about, where is it here? Recording and submitting your videos. So you'll have access to all of that. And of course, we can answer any questions or talk about those as well. But yeah, I guess I'll turn over to Tarn if there's anybody you want to highlight or open up to.
I think maybe we've got about 10 minutes left in the session, so maybe we could open up the floor to questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand or type it in the chat, and we'll share it with Melissa, and she'll share her response with you. Okay, while you're thinking about questions or typing them in the chat, I'm just going to put in the registration information for the Parkwood Institute Research Day. It's here for you. If you register before the 20th, as Melissa politely plugged, you get entered into a draw for a door prize. So please take the time to register. I also want to ask all of you to please provide your feedback on this particular event. And so I'm just going to drop in a Qualtrics link. Qualtrics is another survey program that you are welcome to use. I believe many individuals who have affiliations with Western can access Qualtrics. But if you could please complete the feedback survey on this particular event, we'd love to learn from you what you liked, what you'd like to see in the future. Heather asks, are there any pointers for using 4 waves? And that's a great question.
Yeah.
Maybe Melissa, you could talk a little bit about 4 waves since it's new this year for anyone returning. We used a platform called Whova in the past, but we've switched to 4 waves.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. And I see there's another one, but I'll answer this one first. So 4 Waves is the new program we're using instead of Whova, which we had been using for the last little while there. And this one is a little bit different, but not I personally think it's a little bit easier to navigate. So this is actually specifically made for organizations that do research. It's an Ontario-based, I believe they're from Ottawa, and it's specifically around research. So we don't have any content up now as far as videos go. Obviously, we haven't got them submitted because we're doing this presentation today. But I'll give you a brief overview, and then we'll be sending out a video in the days before the event that gives people a little walkthrough. So when you get that reminder, you know, it's 2 days to the event, make sure to take a look. There'll be a video that actually kind of shows you the more in-depth work. But you can see along the top here, we've just got the breakdown that we have so far of the 4 sections that are up. First one, obviously our homepage just talks about what the point of the day is. So we've got our research focuses and the objectives for the day, as well as our supporters. It's also got my information on there. So again, if you have any concerns or questions, feel free to link them to me. Registration is going to be the one that's important to you right now. Again, this is just giving you the gist of what we're going to cover today, or not today, at the event. And then we just ask a few questions. How did you hear about the event? You know, what's your position, etc. And that just registers you for the event. Once you're registered, you get listed here on the participant page. So you can see there's a couple people here who are listed. You can update with information about where you're from. So we have a couple people here saying which team they're a part of. Again, you can kind of go in, click on it, and you can learn about these various individuals. So you can actually change your image, add a little bio, all the information as well. Can be kind of nice to know who's attending. And then we have, of course, the agenda for the day. So our agenda is pretty much just an overview right now, since we don't have the names of all the presentations in. But you can see at the side here, we have our breakdown of our times, what's happening during that period. And then there's the option to star anything you want to make sure that you attend. So, you know, it'll be more useful, you know, once we actually have the presentation options, for example, for the live breakout workshops. but you can pin anything that you want to attend. But that's basically it. It's basically just, the agenda is going to be there. And of course, the registration will be removed once the actual event is going. So you can see what's happening right now, which is a nice way of just kind of pulling up exactly what's being presented. So if there's a keynote, for example, and you don't want to kind of find it on the list, you can go in that way. So this will keep getting updated. We'll also have a section at the top here for poster presentations, so people will be able to really quickly click and find all of the posters. And we'll also have one for all the contests we're running. So we did mention, obviously, the early registration contest, which I could probably put live right now, actually. But we have some others as well. We have some trivia. We have some best poster presentations like we usually do. So yeah, I hope that gives you a little bit of information so it seems a little bit less daunting. But it is much more streamlined because Whova was very much a program for kind of sales and those kind of events. And this is specifically for research. And eventually we'll be doing our abstracts and everything will be submitted through this as well. So it's going to help long term. It's going to be a lot easier for everybody. You'll be actually able to upload your videos here instead of having to email them. But we bypassed it this time. So long story short, this is what it kind of looks like, and we'll make sure you get a more in-depth walkthrough in the days before the event. So I hope that helps. Okay, Emma, for PIR Research Day, do we create a traditional poster along with presentation or just a presentation? I don't know if you want to answer that, Tarn, as far as that
we sort of give the option here. Some people prefer the traditional poster, so there isn't any issues with that. What you may want to do is, as Melissa has said, is maybe focus on certain portions of it as you talk through it, because it's easier to visually read and digest the information. Mm-hmm. The alternative is to just do a presentation for your abstract. Most people tend to go that route instead of making the whole poster. But I understand that some groups might have a whole poster on the go and that will work better for them. So you can actually choose, but we ask that you only submit one. So you either submit a traditional poster where you talk, or you submit a presentation where you talk. Does that help, Emma?
Yeah, awesome.
Perfect.
John had a question, great question, is do you have any recommendations for keeping the file size of a presentation down? Yes, one thing that I really commonly do is I compress my PDFs or my presentations. There are a few different options. There aren't as many options through Google Slides as there are in PowerPoint. In PowerPoint, you can actually say, basically, how do I give an example? So this image, for example, this is not the regular size of the image. I sized this down to fit where I wanted it, but that means it has more information in it than we are actually using in this presentation. So in PowerPoint, you can actually say, I believe it's like, I might have to look up the wording for it, but you can basically say like, delete anything that's cropped, make the image the size that it appears. Those are big ones. Honestly, the biggest thing is video and image files. The other thing I do is I'll run it through a compression program online. So this is just a free one. I just Google compressed PDF and find one that doesn't require me to add my email. So choose file, and then I actually downloaded the presentation. Where did I put it? I downloaded the presentation. There we go. I'll just grab it from my desktop. So you can actually do it with this presentation file. So this is a PDF of the presentation I just made. So I just went to file and I downloaded it, and you can download it in whatever format you like. JPEGs and PNGs are images, and it'll tell you like this is just the current slide, for example, or you can do a full PowerPoint, you can do a full PDF. So there you go. So it's 36 pages long and it's 9.8 megabytes big. So things that you can change about it. So you can change it so it's just grayscale. Again, that'll reduce it. Probably don't want to do that. Image quality. So right now the image quality is 100%. So if we reduce that and say, well, we don't need the images to be super high quality, they can go down to 75. And then dots per inch is, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's how many dots make up every image and text thing. So when you print things, there's a certain dots per inch that people can see, but online it's a lot lower. So I believe printed, it's something like 300 dots per inch. And then I think online it's only like 75, which means that people can't really see the difference between a presentation that's at 75 and 150. So anyways, you can choose to modify those as you like. And then I'm just going to compress it. We'll see how this goes. So all I'm doing in this case is reducing the dots per inch and the image quality. So here we go. So the PDF has been processed and it reduced it by 45%. So if I re-download this now, I'm not sure how long it'll take. There we go. Not too long at all. So this is, 45% saves, 55% the size. And if we compare it, so this is the original that I put in. Let's grab one with an image, for example. So there's the questions. And if we go down to this reduced image one, you can't really tell the difference between them. There we go. They're lined up better. So again, it's reduced, it's compressed it by taking away the parts that we can't actually see because it's online. So the presentation looks the same to you. If I sent you one of these or the other, you probably wouldn't notice the difference, but one of them is 55% the size of the other. So again, you can do those. I think Adobe has an option for it as well. But that's the thing I'd recommend as far as that goes, is compressing is really helpful. And obviously take a look when you're done, make sure you didn't compress things down too far. I've done it before where, if we actually, maybe I can pull it open again. We can compress it even, and maybe to a too large effect, let's say. So let's grab it again. And this time, let's do the dots per inch at 20 and the image quality at 20. Obviously, this is going to make it quite a lot different, and not in a good way. This is going to be probably too low quality for us to use. But just to give you a sense of kind of what's possible here. So this one's been reduced by 84%. So very big difference there. But let's see what it actually looks like to us. So you can see the text is all fine because the text doesn't take up too much, but the images are very, very blurry. So again, we just kind of had to play with it to get it to what you want. But yeah, a lot of this, like this version, I wouldn't necessarily share because of the pictures. But, obviously when we reduced it just a fraction less, it looked almost exactly the same. So I hope that helps. Obviously happy to take a look and play with whatever program you're using. I believe Canva does it automatically, but and PowerPoint has options built into PowerPoint that will automatically let you do so.
So we've reached 2:30. I just want to thank Melissa so much for her time and all of you for attending. Melissa, is it okay if I put your email address in the text in case somebody has some questions after today's event?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Please do. And I will make sure I will email right now the presentation to you so it can be shared.
Thank you
sure
again.
I don't send that horrible last one we did.
And if anyone needs to reach me, my email's in there as well. Just a reminder for anyone who has been accepted for a poster presentation for Research Day, please get those presentations to us for Wednesday, April the 19th. We do need some time to sort of go through them, make sure the quality is there, and then upload them. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone. I appreciate that you've joined us.
Yeah, thanks so much, everybody. Take care.
Thanks again, Melissa, for another amazing presentation.
Oh, thanks. I
appreciate it.
Lost track of time at the end there.
Well, there's so many great resources, right? And if you had the time to like sit down and go through some things with people, it's easy to.
All the questions they had were in the first third of the presentation. So I was like, well, let's focus on that then.
Yeah, that's perfect. And it might just represent new users versus like people who've been around in the system for a while. So
yeah.
But it's great they have all those other slides that you've provided as well. So when they get to the next stage and they're asking questions about that, then they're able to walk through that. So yeah, so it's awesome. All right, I won't keep you. Thank you again so much. And I'll talk to you again probably really, really soon.
Right.
Yeah.
Coming up. All right. Take care.
Yep, you too. Thanks, Melissa. Okay, bye.